The arrivals hall at Heathrow always smelled like overbrewed coffee and jet fuel, a mix that clung to your clothes and made the air feel charged with impatience. Under the unflattering brightness of fluorescent panels, everything looked slightly harsher. Faces, uniforms, suspicion. The diplomatic entry corridor at Gate C was designed to be efficient, even gracious. A row of polished counters, frosted glass panels bearing little flags, a carpet that swallowed the sound of rolling luggage, a sign that promised expedited processing for those rare few whose passports weren't the standard burgundy of the European Union or navy blue of tourists, but an obsidian black that meant, this person is the state. It was a lane where bows were subtle, smiles were thin, and most of the talking happened through stamped ink. Into that curated quiet stepped Dr. Amara Johnson. She wore a navy suit that fit like a pinion, and a silk scarf the color of rain on asphalt. Her hair was pulled into a sleek bun that made the lines of her face look deliberate. Even her carry-on moved quietly, wheels whispering across the carpet as if they too had diplomatic immunity. In her right hand she carried the black book that rearranged rooms, a United States diplomatic passport, the coat of arms embossed in gold, light catching on the letters like a warning and a promise. The officer behind the counter glanced up. Gareth Milton was in his late 40s, pale under the harsh lights, uniform tight at the neck, eyes bagged with years of watching other people's lives pass through his booth. He'd developed a way of looking at travelers that separated them into categories before they spoke. Harmless, trouble, entitled, desperate. He saw the black passport. Then he saw the black woman. The small calculations behind his eyes started moving in the wrong direction. Next, he called, already evaluating. Amara stepped forward and set the passport directly on the rubber mat, spine aligned with the counter's edge. "Good morning," she said, voice even, not over-bright the way people get when they're trying to be palatable. The greeting landed on the glass like a coin in a wishing well. Milton pinched the passport with 2 fingers and cracked it open with a flourish meant to look routine. He skimmed the photo, then lifted his eyes to her. The resemblance was exact. Same cheekbones, same calm gaze that didn't try to charm him into compliance. He let the silence stretch. "Purpose of travel?" he asked finally, in that slow, extra enunciated cadence reserved for toddlers and people one does not expect to meet standards. "Official business," she replied. "Diplomatic consultations in Whitehall. No softness. No apology." A statement like a line drawn. He clicked his tongue quietly, a tiny scolding. "We get a lot of these lately." He tapped the passport's cover with a forefinger. "Black books? You'd be surprised what looks real and isn't." A man in line behind Amara chuckled the chuckle of someone who trusted his own prejudices. A woman with twins, each in a dinosaur hoodie, sighed theatrically. Somewhere farther back, a phone's camera shutter faked a click. The sound was off, meant for nostalgia, but it signaled something else. Documentation had entered the chat. "I'm sure your system can tell the difference," Amara said. She rested her left hand lightly on the telescoping handle of her carry-on and kept her shoulders level. "System's down to a crawl," Milton said, though his monitor glowed steady. "We'll have to do this the careful way." He turned the passport to the light, pretending the fluorescent bulbs were some kind of forensic sun. He rubbed a thumb across the hologram, as if a counterfeit would confess under pressure. "You're welcome to scan it," she said, not pleading, offering. He set the passport down, then pointed with a pen toward the glass-walled area 30 feet to the right. Secondary screening. A transparent purgatory with plastic seats, a sign that said, "Please wait quietly," and 2 uniforms whose faces had learned to be both bored and stern. "You'll need to step over there while we verify." It was a sentence with 1,000 subclauses that went unspoken. "You'll be seen. You'll be categorized. Your dignity will be checked like baggage." "No," Amara said. Heads turned. The word sat in the air, small and absolute. Milton's eyebrows twitched. "Excuse me?" "I won't be seated in that holding area," she said, tone unchanged. "You can verify at this counter. You have my documents." She slid another item across the mat. A black leather credential wallet that opened to a hard-edged card with a seal that had stopped wars and started them. Department of State, her name. Her title, a signature that belonged to the only person in America who could fire a Secretary of State, the businessman. Behind her, the one in a charcoal suit that wanted the world to know it had cost 2 paychecks for someone else, leaned forward. "Good grief," he said to no one and everyone. "We're play acting now, are we?" He raised his phone more openly. "This should be rich." Amara turned just enough to let her eyes meet his. Not a glare, not a plea. Something steadier, like weight being set on the correct shelf. He lowered his phone a fraction on reflex, embarrassed to find himself the one being evaluated. Milton didn't notice the social weather change. He lifted his desk phone and dialed without looking away from Amara, performing authority for his audience. "Yes, I've got a female presenting with a black passport. Claims she's diplomatic, says she won't go to secondary. Name is Johnson, Amara. Yes, US. No, not accompanied. Yes, she has an ID card. Yes, it looks official." He listened, jaw set in that "I'm not impressed" posture that breeds in places where other people queue. Across the lane, a teenage boy with earbuds slid one out and whispered to his screen, "Yo, Heathrow drama," while the live chat in the lower third of his phone, anonymous and ravenous, spooled up like a storm. Amara kept her attention centered. The carpet under her shoes was plush enough to steal the fatigue from most legs, but she let the ache rise, didn't pressure it away. Fatigue had a purpose. So did memory. Her father explaining to a 12-year-old what to do when a teacher called the police because she fit the description. Her mentor sliding a book across a desk and saying, "Read the policy like it's a map. Find the route people pretend doesn't exist." The first time she'd held this black passport in a government office that smelled like old paper and new power, it had felt less like a trophy and more like a tool, something heavy with obligations. Milton hung up. "Verification will take time," he said, voice flatter. "Rules are rules. Over there." He wagged his pen at the glass corral again. "You can verify here," she repeated. "I am not moving to that pen." "Ma'am," he said, part exasperation, part threat. "I'm instructing you, and I'm declining," she said. "You're welcome to call a supervisor." He smirked like a man who believes the cavalry always rides for him. Happily, he pushed a button under the desk. Somewhere behind the frosted partition, a buzzer sounded. A door clicked. The 2 unsmiling security guards at secondary straightened their backs. The queue pressed closer on molecules of curiosity. A gray-haired woman in an oatmeal cardigan whispered to her husband, "You see? They always try something." A young South Asian grad student with a battered backpack murmured, "This seems off," and started recording with the tremor of someone who had never wanted to be brave in public before, but could feel courage building like a slow seam of heat under the floor. A Welsh flight attendant on her day off watched from another lane, jaw clenched, face saying, "I've seen this go sideways too many times." 2 Border Force officers arrived, vests stiff, boots careful. One, a woman with her hair in a tight coil and a name tag that read J. Pritchard, took in the tableau with quick professional eyes. "What's the situation?" she asked, low enough to be polite, loud enough to be heard by the phones. Milton straightened in his chair as if his spine belonged to the Queen. Passenger presenting a black passport, refusing to comply with secondary screening. Claims diplomatic status. Claims, someone behind Amara repeated. Like a chorus line, Pritchard looked at the passport on the mat, then at the ID, then at Amara. She did what Milton had not. She recalibrated. "Ma'am," she said, careful, "for the record, can you confirm your purpose of travel?" "Diplomatic consultations," Amara said. "Whitehall. Meetings are on my schedule with the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office. May I see your assignment orders?" Pritchard asked, not mocking, actually asking. Amara opened her phone with a thumbprint, navigated to an email from a state.gov domain, and held the device flat so Pritchard could read the subject lines, the seals, the names. She did not hand the phone across the counter. She had learned what handovers got you. Pritchard read, nodded once. Behind her, the second officer, a broad man whose look drifted between suspicion and boredom, shifted his weight like a bouncer. Milton felt the moment tilting away. He tapped his keyboard harder, as if aggressive keystrokes could conjure a result. "We still need to follow procedure," he said. "Secondary is non-negotiable." Non-negotiable. Amara echoed softly, as if tasting the word for cracks. Article 40 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations requires freedom of movement for members of the mission and their families. Your own policy manual, section 7.3, states that holders of diplomatic passports with valid ID should be processed at primary inspection unless there is an articulable security concern unrelated to status or appearance. She didn't raise her voice, but the phrases carried like a bell. What is your articulable security concern, Officer Milton? A thin flush climbed his neck, the kind of pink that travels with anger and embarrassment. He glanced at Pritchard for rescue. We've had forgeries, he said to the room more than to Amara. Trends. It's not about... He cut himself off before the word race completed its journey to the air. The businessman's phone caught that cut halfway through. His live stream comments bloomed. He almost said it. She got him, hope she sues. Pritchard's radio crackled. A clipped voice. Supervisor to Gate C, Diplomatic. She answered, received, then looked at Amara. Ma'am, may I at least scan the passport at primary? No secondary, here. That's what I asked for, Amara said. She slid the book back toward the scanner with a small push. The machine beeped a polite clinical acknowledgement. The monitor bloomed with data. Milton leaned in before Pritchard could. Lines of text scrolled. Issuance authority, expiration, entitlements, alerts. The word valid appeared in green. It was not an ambiguous shade. He clicked to a secondary screen, then a third, as if a red flag might be hiding behind a polite one. Nothing but green. He swallowed. He did not announce the result. Phones captured his silence. Result? Pritchard asked, not unkindly. Milton cleared his throat. Awaiting remote confirmation, he lied with the confidence of habit. Amara let the lie sit between them long enough to be seen by everyone. She did not correct him. She turned slightly, and the Q saw the black passport, her profile. The calm mouth that wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of a tremor. Black woman not begging to be believed. A black woman requiring that the system keep its own promises. From the general arrivals hall, a man in a slate suit with a lanyard that said Supervisor Patel emerged, walking fast, face shaped into neutrality. He surveyed the cluster, the glass pen, the lift of phones, the diplomat who would not step aside to be made an example of. His expression flickered, first to assessment, then to risk management. He stepped into the triangle of counter officer traveler. Good morning, he said. I'm Supervisor Patel. May I assist? Amara met him halfway. Yes. Assist by processing me at primary as required by your manual. Your officer has scanned my documents. The system has responded. Patel's eyes cut to the monitor. He was the kind of manager who had not forgotten how to read his own tools. The word valid was not ambiguous for him either. He masked the knowledge with bureaucratic caution. We're in the middle of additional verification, he began. We are not, Amara said. We are in the middle of additional delay. The grad student with the battered backpack said into his stream, voice shaking a little less now. She's quoting policy. They hate that. A woman 3 people back, olive trenchcoat tote that said The Economist, raised her voice just enough. I've been in that pen, she said. It's humiliating. She's right. Process her here. The businessman swiveled to her, already on the wrong team. Some of us have flights, he snapped. Some of us have rights, she snapped back, and the queue found itself an audience divided into 2 choruses. Patel lifted a palm. Let's keep the temperature down, he addressed Amara. May I ask the nature of your mission? You may not, she said. You may ask the State Department through the normal channels, which would not involve making me an exhibit in front of 100 strangers. Patel's gaze cut to the forest of phones. 100 was conservative. He imagined the numbers behind those numbers, shares, clips, hashtags that mutate like bacteria. He imagined his name in a caption. He imagined his boss's boss phoning to ask why Heathrow was trending for the wrong reasons. He smiled a smile that had been practiced to look like courtesy and said, "A moment, please," to no one and everyone. He stepped back and hissed to Milton through his teeth. "What are you doing?" "Trend," Milton muttered. "Forgeries? It's not personal." "It's always personal when you make it a performance," Patel hissed back. Pritchard pretended not to hear, eyes on the screen, radio in hand like a lifeline. Amara stayed still. She felt the weight of the black passport like a small stone in her chest pocket. She thought about the last time she'd had to remind a uniform that she did not need anyone to escort her into the house of her own rights. She thought about all the names of people who hadn't had a black book or a camera's protection, and what had happened to them in rooms without windows. Her phone buzzed once, an alert set to a vibration, like the tap of a spoon on china. She didn't check it. She knew who it would be, her liaison at the embassy, her chief of staff in D.C., a journalist friend who always seemed to be where the fire started. She kept her hands visible, palms resting on the handle of her carry-on, a posture that made her look almost relaxed. The cue shifted. The twins in dinosaur hoodies ate the last of their biscuits. Crumbs fell on the carpet like tiny confetti for a ceremony no one wanted. The Welsh flight attendant, her name was Karis, though this scene didn't need it, moved closer and said quietly to the grad student, "Filming's legal from here. Don't step past the tape." He nodded, grateful for adult supervision. A door to the left opened again. This time it wasn't security. A woman in a navy sheath dress, blazer sharp as a blade, strode through, heels making the kind of sound that cuts through rooms not because it's loud, but because it is confident about where it belongs. The badge at her hip read Border Force, Inspector E. Lang. She didn't waste time on Milton. She looked directly at Amara. "Dr. Johnson." Amara inclined her head. "Yes, I received a call from the embassy. I'm Inspector Lang." She turned to Patel and Milton without softening. "Why is this traveler not already stamped and through?" Milton opened his mouth and found nothing smart in it. Patel recovered faster. "We were, performing due diligence given recent patterns of what?" Lang asked, not moving her eyes from his face. "Exactly?" Patel swallowed. "Counterfeit documentation. Which your own scanner confirmed is not the case," she said, glancing at the monitor. "And which does not require relocating a properly documented diplomat to a glass enclosure like a misbehaving child." She cut a look to Pritchard. "Thank you for scanning. Log it?" "Yes, Inspector," Pritchard said, relief quiet as a breath. Lang returned her attention to Amara, and something like respect softened the inspector's posture by 1 degree. "Apologies for the delay, Doctor. We'll process you now." Milton's mouth worked. "But the only but here," Lang said, "is the one that will appear in my report if this continues." She held out a hand for the passport, which Amara passed to her without ceremony. Lang stamped, scanned, typed a note that placed the burden of accountability exactly where it belonged, and slid the black book back across the counter like a finishing move. "Welcome to the United Kingdom," she said. Phones recorded that sentence, and the way the room exhaled around it. The businessman behind Amara huffed, as if someone had spoiled his entertainment. The grad student whispered to his stream. She knew the policy. She held the line. The Welsh flight attendant, Karis, allowed herself a small nod that looked like a prayer answered. Amara accepted the passport and the crispness with which it made a sound when it closed. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She looked at Milton and said gently and without bending, "You will want to review Section 7.3 before your next shift, Officer Milton." Then, to Patel, "And you will want to review your staff's adherence to your own manuals before your next weekly report." Patel nodded. Throat working, already composing an email that would swing between contrition and cover. Inspector Lang shifted half a step, placing her own body in the space between Amara and any further foolishness. "If anyone has further concerns," she said to the air, "they may send them to my office in writing." To Amara, "May I walk you through?" "I can manage," Amara said. The refusal was not unkind. It was a reassertion of sovereignty. She lifted the handle of her carry-on and began to move. Not fast, not slow. Exactly at the speed of a person in control of her own narrative. As she passed the line, there were looks. A woman in the oatmeal cardigan kept her eyes on the floor. The businessman tucked his phone away, suddenly remembering he had somewhere else to be. The grad student whispered, "Thank you," in a way that meant something bigger than gratitude for delay. Karis gave a small, tight smile that said, "I will tell this story the next time someone tells me I imagined it." Halfway to the exit, Amara's phone buzzed again. She glanced down just long enough to read the preview from a number labeled Embassy Liaison. Saw the stream. Whitehall notified. We're ready if you want to file a formal complaint. She typed back without breaking stride. Not yet. Send them a training request and a copy of their own manual instead. The automatic doors sighed open to the broader arrivals hall. A landscape of reunions and signs on sticks, and the fresh fatigue of people who had just discovered their luggage wasn't on the carousel. Somewhere a child squealed, "Granddad!" and a grown man became 10 years younger. Somewhere else a driver with a cap held a sign that said Mr. Kim. As if Mr. Kim were always made of paper and not a person. Amara kept moving until she reached a quieter corner near a bank of windows where planes taxied like slow metal whales. Only then did she allow herself a breath that went all the way down. She slid the passport back into the inside pocket, where it pressed a familiar shape against her ribs. She touched the edge once, a ritual as old as any prayer, not to bless the book but to remind herself what it was for. Not to save her. To make her useful. Behind her, the hall continued to buzz, but there was a new note in it. The faint sound of a lesson learned by witnesses who hadn't expected to be students today. On at least 3 phones, a clip began to circulate with captions in different languages. Know the rule before they rewrite it. Ask for the policy. Stay in the light. On one, a quiet voice said, her name was Dr. Amara Johnson, and typed it in the description so that the algorithm would remember. She checked the time. Whitehall would be expecting her. She had a conversation to start that would outlast a stamp and a confrontation. She had a list in her notes app titled For When Politeness Fails. Items numbered 1 through 12 that were not threats so much as eventualities. She hoped she wouldn't need them. She had hoped that 100 times before. Her phone buzzed a 3rd time. This one she answered. Amara, said a voice she trusted, dry and amused. You've had a morning. It's barely begun, she said. She watched a jet slip across the glass like a thought. Tell them I'm on my way. And Heathrow? They'll be fine, she said. They just learned how to read their own manual. She hung up, gathered her bag, and walked toward the doors where London began, the city blinking awake in pale winter light. Behind her, in a booth under fluorescent brightness, a man named Milton stared at section 7.3 on his screen and felt the uncomfortable sensation of being measured by a standard he hadn't expected to meet. A supervisor drafted a memo and changed a training timetable. An inspector filed a report that would move through an office with more attention than most. And in the glass-walled pen, 2 unsmiling guards sat with their boredom and felt for the first time that week, slightly ashamed. The war at the border had not ended. It rarely does, but one skirmish had been won with a black book, a calm voice, and a refusal to sit where she never belonged. And the story of that refusal was already on its way to places where light was hard to come by. Outside, a cold breeze lifted the edges of Amara's scarf. She tightened it once around her throat, the silk whispering like a promise, and stepped into the day. The first-class lounge at Heathrow had always been designed as a sanctuary, a place to cleanse away the fatigue and indignity of travel. Soft lighting pooled against brushed steel columns, leather armchairs sprawled like thrones, and servers in crisp uniforms floated with trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. It was the kind of space where time seemed to move slower, insulated from the chaos of boarding calls and crowded gates. Yet when Dr. Amara Johnson walked through the frosted glass doors, dragging her slim carry-on behind her, the room stiffened like a violin string pulled too tight. She presented her boarding pass and passport to the attendant at the entrance, a young woman with an immaculate bun, red lipstick, and the kind of rehearsed smile that came attached to service industries. The attendant scanned the barcode, glanced down at the black diplomatic passport, then up at Amara's face. The pause was only a second, but in that second the air shifted. The smile faltered, reappeared, then curved differently, no longer automatic, but tinged with something like disbelief. Madam, the attendant said, her voice coated in politeness that cracked at the edges. This area is reserved for diplomats and first-class passengers. Are you certain you're in the right lounge? The words were technically a question, but they landed like a challenge. People in the queue behind Amara raised their heads, some curious, others smirking at the spectacle they anticipated. Amara inhaled once, the calm of someone who had prepared her entire life for moments like this. She slid her documents closer across the polished podium, the passport cover gleaming like obsidian under the lounge's soft lighting. "I am precisely where I belong," she replied evenly. "My credentials should suffice." The attendant hesitated, scanning again, though the machine beeped green the first time. She leaned in, lowering her voice in a way that made it audible to everyone nearby. "It's just unusual. We don't see many travelers like yourself with these kinds of documents." "Travelers like myself?" Amara asked, tone sharp enough to slice through the veneer of politeness. The attendant blinked, suddenly aware of her misstep. "I only meant it's rare, that's all. Please, one moment, I'll have to double-check." Phones appeared like magic. A man in a tailored gray jacket, lounging against a column, angled his device just enough to catch both Amara and the attendant in frame. A woman seated with her laptop open lifted her camera discreetly. The room buzzed, not loudly but with the collective hum of attention, the way an audience prepares itself before a curtain rises. Amara stood still, hands folded over the handle of her carry-on. Her scarf tied neatly at her throat shifted slightly in the air-conditioned breeze. She didn't fidget, she didn't protest. She simply existed, and somehow that seemed to make the tension worse. To many of the onlookers, her composure looked like defiance. To others, it looked like dignity under siege, but every interpretation carried weight. The attendant picked up a desk phone, dialing quickly. Her voice dropped, though the urgency leaked out around the edges. "Yes, I have a passenger here with a diplomatic passport." "Yes, black cover, US. Female, traveling alone." "Yes, I know, but..." She paused, listening. "No, she refuses to step aside. She insists she belongs here." The phrase "refuses to step aside" spread like spilled wine. A man sipping champagne muttered to his companion, "There it is. Always some sort of scene." His companion raised an eyebrow but said nothing, eyes still fixed on Amara. Another passenger whispered, "She must have forged it." "They'll find out soon enough." Amara's phone buzzed in her blazer pocket. She didn't reach for it. She knew what the message would say. Her chief of staff monitoring the situation, already aware through the live streams that were undoubtedly circulating. She stayed present, her gaze forward, shoulders square. After a tense minute, a lounge manager appeared. He was a tall man in a slim black suit, his name tag reading Richard Hawthorne. He carried himself with the authority of someone used to diffusing wealthy tantrums and smoothing feathers for VIPs. But his eyes betrayed him. They narrowed as soon as they landed on Amara. His steps slowed, as if recalibrating what kind of confrontation this might be. "Good afternoon," he said, too brightly. "I'm Richard, the lounge manager. There seems to be some confusion about your entry." "There is no confusion," Amara said. She extended her documents again, the passport lying open like a challenge. "You may confirm my credentials against your system." "They will match." Hawthorne didn't touch the passport immediately. He circled the counter as though proximity might offer clues. "We've had, unfortunately, an increase in fraudulent attempts to access this lounge," he explained, projecting his voice for the benefit of the crowd. "So you'll understand our caution." The crowd nodded, a ripple of consensus. Fraudulent, caution. Words that framed Amara as a potential threat rather than a guest. Hawthorne finally took the passport, flipping it open with deliberate slowness. He examined the ID page, squinting as though the letters might rearrange themselves. He turned to the attendant. "Did you run this through the scanner?" "Yes, sir," she replied quickly. It beeped green. "And yet here we are," Hawthorne muttered, half to himself. At that, Amara spoke, her tone cutting through the murmur of the lounge. "If your machine has validated my documents, the only thing we are verifying now is your comfort with who is holding them." The line landed like a spark in dry brush. A few people gasped softly. Someone whispered, "She said it." The businessman with the gray jacket smirked, his phone angled higher, no longer pretending discretion. The live stream comments poured in, scrolling across his screen. "She's killing him with facts. Classic profiling. Wait, is this live?" Hawthorne stiffened. "There's no need to make this personal, madam." "It became personal the moment you questioned whether I belonged here," Amara replied. The attendant looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to another. Hawthorne pressed his lips together, then gestured. "Please have a seat in that area while we contact additional authorities." He pointed not toward the plush armchairs, but toward a roped-off section near the entrance where passengers deemed problematic were often asked to wait. It wasn't a detention area, not formally, but its symbolism was unmistakable. A place apart, visible to everyone, marked by exclusion. Amara did not move. Her voice was steady. "You will not relegate me to a corner like a misbehaving child. You will process me here, as you would any diplomat whose passport your machine has already validated." Phones angled higher. The tension ratcheted. A woman in a red blazer whispered, "She's brave." Another muttered, "She's reckless." The narrative was already splitting into factions. Hawthorne exhaled sharply. "Very well," he said, flipping the passport closed and handing it back. "But understand that if this is fraudulent, the consequences will be severe." "They will be," Amara said calmly. "But not for me." At that moment, one of the onlookers, an older man with salt and pepper hair and a tweed jacket, spoke up from his armchair. His voice carried the authority of someone used to being listened to. "I've traveled with a black passport for 25 years, he said. "Never once have I been asked to justify my presence here. Why is today different?" The room froze. Hawthorne's composure faltered. "Sir, with respect," the man interrupted. "You are wasting this woman's time and embarrassing your own institution." The live streams ate it up. Comments exploded. "Ally spotted." Finally, someone else speaks. "Manager looks cooked." The algorithm spun faster. Amara inclined her head slightly toward the older man. She didn't need to say thank you. The acknowledgement was enough. She turned back to Hawthorne. "Now, if you have no further obstacles, I will take my seat." Hawthorne hesitated, then stepped aside. The attendant swallowed and gestured toward the lounge proper. "Right this way, madam." Amara retrieved her passport, tucked it into her blazer, and rolled her carry-on forward. The crowd parted, some avoiding her gaze, others meeting it with a mix of admiration and discomfort. Phones tracked her movement like spotlights, recording every step. She walked with the same deliberate calm she had carried through customs, the kind of calm that unsettled those who expected fear. She chose a seat near the center of the lounge, setting her bag neatly by her side. A server approached hesitantly, offering a glass of champagne. She accepted it, lifting it in a silent toast, not to celebrate, but to punctuate. Around her, whispers continued, cameras blinked, and the digital world outside the lounge erupted. By the time she sipped, the first clip had already gone viral on Twitter. "Black Diplomat challenges Heathrow lounge staff. The only thing we are verifying now is your comfort with who is holding the passport." It was retweeted thousands of times within minutes. Screenshots spread on Instagram. Commentators on TikTok stitched the video, their captions blazing. "When calm destroys prejudice." She didn't raise her voice once. Amara leaned back in the leather chair, eyes steady, expression unreadable. She had won the moment, but she knew the battle was far from over. Outside the insulated walls of the lounge, her name was becoming a symbol. And symbols always came with weight, and so, under the soft glow of champagne glasses and whispers of disbelief, the war over belonging moved to its next front, the court of public opinion. Terminal 5 was alive in the way only international airports could be. Thousands of bodies funneling through security lanes, departure boards flickering like heartbeat monitors, the smell of espresso and jet fuel mingling in the recycled air. Yet as Dr. Amara Johnson walked through the concourse after the incident in the first-class lounge, the atmosphere around her felt charged, almost electric. Heads turned not simply because of her presence, but because by now she was no longer just a passenger. She was a trending story. Her phone buzzed relentlessly in her blazer pocket. Notifications piled in faster than she could read them. Diplomat while black had exploded on Twitter. Clips of the confrontation in the lounge, her calm voice saying, "The only thing we are verifying now is your comfort with who is holding the passport," were being replayed across Instagram Reels, TikTok stitches, and YouTube commentary channels. A 20-second video had already surpassed 1 million views. She didn't even need to post. The world was posting for her. As she strode past a duty-free shop, she caught her reflection in the glass. Her posture was perfect, her scarf immaculate, her face set in quiet resolve. She looked like someone untouched by the chaos swirling around her. But inside her mind moved quickly, cataloging risks, calculating outcomes. Every step she took was documented now. The airport was filled with cameras, some official, most not, and each lens reframed her story. She found a quieter corner near her gate, a seating area with long glass windows overlooking the tarmac, where jumbo jets lumbered like metal whales. She set her carry-on beside her, pulled out her phone, and began scrolling through the deluge. CNN breaking, Black American diplomat challenges, Heathrow lounge over profiling allegations, BBC World. Confrontation in first-class lounge sparks debate on race and travel, hashtags. Heathrow incident. Imara Johnson, diplomat while black, her assistant Jordan, had sent 12 messages in the last 10 minutes. Media requests are coming in non-stop. CNN, Al Jazeera, even Sky News. Do you want me to filter? Another message followed. UK Foreign Office has already called asking if you'll issue a statement. They're nervous. Amara typed a single response. Hold all interviews. No statement until I board. She understood the calculus. Speak too soon and her words would be lost in the noise. Wait, and anticipation would turn into leverage. Silence was not weakness. Silence was pressure. From the corner of her eye, she noticed 3 men in suits approach. Airport security officials by their clipped steps and earpieces. Their leader, a tall man with a shaved head, stopped just short of her seat. Dr. Johnson, he said. May we have a word? Amara looked up, her expression unreadable. That depends. Are you here to protect a passenger or to silence a problem? The man blinked, caught off guard by the precision of her question. We're here to ensure your travel proceeds smoothly. But the incident in the lounge has escalated. Management is concerned. Concerned for whom? Amara asked, rising smoothly to her feet. For their reputation or for my dignity? He hesitated, then gestured toward a nearby private office. Please, this way. It will be more discreet. Phones lifted again. Travelers in the waiting area were already recording. Amara knew stepping into a back office could look like a concession, like submission. She shook her head slightly. No, if you want to speak with me, you'll do it here. Transparency is the only protection I have. The man's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Very well. Dr. Johnson, Heathrow management has requested a formal statement from you regarding the incident. They'd prefer if you framed it as a misunderstanding, to avoid inflaming tensions. Amara almost laughed. A misunderstanding? When your staff questioned the legitimacy of a diplomatic passport issued by the United States government, when they asked me to sit in a corner like a misbehaving child, that is not a misunderstanding. That is discrimination, witnessed and recorded by dozens, now millions. The security officers shifted uncomfortably. One of them whispered into his radio. The tall man tried again. If this becomes an international issue, the airport's reputation will suffer. Amara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a measured intensity. Then perhaps Heathrow should have considered its reputation before allowing prejudice to dictate procedure. The surrounding passengers applauded softly, some clapping outright. Phones captured every word. The narrative was no longer controllable by Heathrow's PR team. It belonged to the crowd. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call. She glanced at the screen. U.S. Embassy, London. She answered. Dr. Johnson, this is Ambassador Reynolds, came the clipped, authoritative voice. We've been made aware of the situation. It's already hit State Department briefings. Are you safe? I am safe, Amara replied. But safety is not the point. Dignity is. They want me to frame this as a misunderstanding. Don't, the ambassador said firmly. We'll handle the diplomatic channels. You maintain your ground. Washington supports you. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then let Heathrow sweat. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. The tall officer looked rattled. That was my government, she said simply. They are watching, the officer swallowed, then muttered. We'll report that you are continuing your journey as planned. They retreated quickly, vanishing into the terminal crowd. Amara sat again, crossing her legs, adjusting her scarf. The applause from earlier had faded, replaced by a reverent hush. People looked at her differently now, not as a passenger in conflict, but as a figure carrying a weight larger than herself. Her flight was announced over the intercom. Boarding for Washington, D.C. Priority for diplomats in first class. The irony wasn't lost on her. She rose, collected her carry-on, and walked toward the gate. The sea of cameras parted before her like water. Every step was filmed, every blink catalogued. At the gate, another attendant waited. She was young, nervous, her hands fidgeting with the scanner. "Boarding pass and passport, please." Amara handed them over without a word. The scanner beeped green instantly. The attendant's eyes flicked to Amara's, wide and apologetic. "Have a pleasant flight, Dr. Johnson." Amara inclined her head slightly. "For all our sakes, I hope it is." She stepped onto the jet bridge, the noise of the terminal fading behind her. But she knew the storm wasn't fading, it was only beginning. Inside the aircraft, passengers were already scrolling through feeds filled with her face, her words, her defiance. And in capitals across the world, officials were drafting memos, calculating fallout, and preparing for a reckoning that had started with a single question in a lounge. "Are you certain you're in the right place?" The storm had broken, and Amara Johnson was at its center. ChatGPT. The cabin lights were dialed to that pre-departure dusk that made metal feel like evening, even though London was still mid-afternoon beyond the oval windows. Dr. Amara Johnson stepped through the doorway of 1L and paused, not because she needed to get her bearings, but because she could feel the atmosphere before she saw it. The way conversation thinned when a story walked in wearing a human face, row by row, heads tilted up from screens glowing with the same clip, her voice in the lounge, the line about comfort and who holds the passport, subtitled in half a dozen languages, by accounts that moved faster than official statements. A flight attendant with a name badge that said Janelle in tidy serif raised her professional smile like a shield, and then lowered it when recognition chased training. The smile came back different, tight around the eyes like someone trying to put a lid on steam. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Johnson," she said, soft enough that only the first 2 rows would hear. "We'll do everything we can to make your flight comfortable." The phrasing was precise, the promise intentionally modest. Comfort was negotiable. Safety wasn't. Amara held the attendant's gaze for exactly a beat, acknowledgement without absolution, then moved to her seat at 2A. The man in 1C, sandy hair, cufflinks the size of tiny compasses, gave her a look that would have been curiosity in another life, but today had the acidic edge of someone who'd said something in a group chat that didn't age well within an hour. He lifted his glass. She did not lift hers. She stowed her carry-on with the economy of someone who had practiced not taking up more than her seat's footprint. And when she settled into the leather, she felt the plane itself settle around her, as if the fuselage had been holding its breath. Her phone buzzed. "Jordan, Whitehall confirms your 0900. AM's office offered motorcade on arrival, declined as requested. UK press pack wants comment at gate. Holding." Another buzz, Ambassador Reynolds again, this time a text. FO called. "They'll open with regret any inconvenience. We'll suggest they try again." A third buzz from a number she didn't have saved but understood anyway, because the message had the cadence of institutional fear forced into polite language. Heathrow corporate would appreciate clarification that today's events were a misunderstanding. She silenced the phone and set it face down on the armrest, as if it were a small, excitable animal that needed to be told to sit. Boarding continued with the choreography of routine, except routine now had a camera operator. The teenage boy from the diplomatic lane, earbud kid, he of the whispered Heathrow drama, appeared in economy, and being economy moved on, but not before angling his phone up the aisle like a periscope. In premium, a woman with a stack of laminated planning sheets nudged her husband with a knuckle and said, "Not quietly enough, that's her." His response, "Well, good for her," came out cautiously, as if he were testing how it would feel to be on the correct side of a headline. Janelle's colleague, a senior attendant named Sarah, silver hair pulled back in a severe twist that somehow read as kind, materialized with a tray of water and apology. "Dr. Johnson, Captain Barrett would like to offer his personal welcome and assurances. If you need anything at all, you can press the call button or ask me directly. Amara nodded, and somewhere behind the bulkhead a body exhaled. The door thunked closed. Pushback was authorized. The cabin dimmed another shade. The safety video started. Smiling actors buckled belts. Child mascot placed a stuffed bear under a seat. Fluorescent arrows promised light in darkness, and the plane rumbled toward the runway in a taxi of stop motion. Roll, wait, roll. Amara listened without hearing. She had seen this dance 100 times, and the choreography had never yet included a clause for dignity. Her phone buzzed again with something she did not ignore, a message from a secure app that routed State Department traffic when speed mattered more than diplomatic punctuation. FYI, select committees monitoring. If FO statement inadequate, we raise. Your discretion at gate. Beneath it, Jordan had appended a screenshot of a trending panel. Diplomat while black, now sandwiched between a pop star's breakup and a mid-table football transfer. It would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. Janelle passed again with a basket of headphones and fear. She lingered as if proximity might enable contrition by osmosis, then moved on when Amara failed to perform the absolving script people always wanted from the offended. It's fine, we're fine, no harm done. The plane turned into position. Engines wound up with a sound like a city inhaling. A quick quiver. The shudder of speed transmuted into lift, and London fell away in rectangles of slate roof and bright blue backyard trampolines. The aircraft tipped into cloud, then into sun. A hush. Then the whispery shuffle of people negotiating their tray tables and the tiny compromises of shared air. Only then did Captain Barrett speak, voice pitched to calm an audience that didn't know it needed calming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're off to Washington with smooth air expected. I know some of you are aware of an incident earlier in the terminal. I want to assure you that our crew takes your dignity and safety seriously. If you need anything, let us know. We'll get you there. The statement threaded a needle. Neither denial nor confession, the aviation equivalent of a tightrope walk over reputational lava. Amara appreciated the balance even as she disliked the necessity. The seatbelt sign clicked off. A few phones reconnected to the paid Wi-Fi with the hungry enthusiasm of habit. A few more flicked to airplane mode's loopholes, snapping pictures to post on Reconnect with captions already drafted. A woman across the aisle leaned over consciously, the way people do when they want to be seen, not staring. Dr. Johnson, she said, I watched the lounge video. She said it like a confession. I wanted to say I'm sorry you had to go through that. I have a son. He's 6. I don't want him to learn the world that way. Amara let the sympathy land without making it a project. Then teach him differently, she said. And the woman nodded as if assigned a task and grateful for it. Service began. Sarah moved like water. Janelle moved like glass. When Janelle arrived at 2A, the tray in her hands did not rattle, but her voice did. Still or sparkling? Still, Amara said. Janelle poured with concentration, as if the laws of physics themselves might be waiting to catch her in a spill. I wanted to apologize, she began. What happened in the lounge? I was not in the lounge with you, Amara said gently, cleaving the air between them with precision. You don't owe me an apology for something you didn't do. Janelle blinked. Relief and confusion crossed her face like fast clouds. Oh, of course. I didn't mean, it's been a morning. It has, Amara agreed. Don't make the error of apologizing for someone else's prejudice when you could spend that breath preventing your own. Janelle stood still long enough for the lesson to settle, then nodded and moved on. Less glass, more human. In row 3, a man had been typing furiously on a laptop since before takeoff, eyes flicking between document and timeline, as if hate could be formatted into a memo. He stopped now to glance at Amara with the appraising look of a junior staffer, trying to predict where power will fall when the day is totaled. He didn't speak. He wouldn't be in the story, but the story would be in him. The cabin settled into cruise. The arc of the flight, that gentle parabola of boredom, refused to assert itself. Screens morphed into mirrors. People watched themselves watching. Amara opened her notebook. Not the phone, not the official pad, but the hardcover she reserved for days when the future needed to be written with ink. She dated the page, then wrote in small, dense script, training that names the thing. Metrics public, Appeals routed external. Protocol card at gates not hidden in manuals. Then a line drawn hard, as if to pin the ideas to paper so they wouldn't slide back into the library of good intentions. The curtain at the galley twitched. The purser, a man with a clipped accent and the confidence of someone who had survived both budget cuts and public tantrums, stepped out and crouched in the aisle beside 2A so his voice wouldn't travel far. "Dr. Johnson," he said, "we've been informed there will be press at the gate. The airport suggests we route you through a service corridor to expedite." "Expedite me past accountability?" Amara asked without looking up. "That's not what he meant," Sarah said from the galley, and the purser had the grace to look properly admonished. "We can, of course, accommodate whatever you prefer," he said. "I prefer to be treated like any other passenger," Amara said. "Which is to say, not paraded, not hidden." "Understood," he said, and he did. He had flown long enough to remember when the aisle was not a stage and the galley not a green room. He knew a performance when he saw one, and he knew too when someone refused to perform. 2 hours in, the Atlantic below unfurled in its impossible featureless blue. Somewhere over that indifferent expanse, the Wi-Fi hiccuped and then returned, bringing with it a second wave of messengers. Jordan again, FO draft statement attached. Regret any distress. Committed to inclusion. Retraining. You'll hate it. Ambassador Reynolds. We pushed back on distress, requested apologize for discriminatory treatment, awaiting. A number labeled press, UK. Good time for exclusive? We'll go gentle. And then a message that made her pause, from Inspector E. Lang, whose heels had cut the air at the border like commas. Report filed. Training flagged as urgent. If you need a sworn statement, I'll provide it. The sentence contained no ornament. It didn't need any. Amara typed, "Thank you. Yes, please send summary to FO and copy embassy." "Send," a child cried, the way children do in pressurized metal tubes designed by engineers who had not been required to soothe anyone smaller than a seatbelt. The mother bounced and shushed and apologized to the air. The man across the aisle frowned. Amara tilted her head and gave the child a smile that was not for the child. Not really, but for the mother. A little bridge of grace across a river of embarrassment. The mother's shoulders lowered. The frown across the aisle loosened its grip on its owner. In row 5, a pair of consultants in matching blue shirts, the uniform of slide deck salesmanship, whispered about optics and levers. One of them said, "If they're smart, they'll make her a partner, not an opponent." The other said, "If they were smart, we wouldn't be here." He had the tone of a person exhausted by preventable fires. Somewhere deep in economy, the earbud kid uploaded a stitched explainer. How to stay calm, how to ask for the policy, how to make yourself unhideable. He spoke with the solemnity of a field reporter and the improvisation of a teenager who had discovered his voice and liked what it could do. His comments were full of people saying, "Saving this for my mom, sending to my aunt, next time I fly." A turbulence ripple introduced itself like a cough in a quiet room. The seatbelt sign blinked back on with its tiny chime. The plane shivered. Drinks trembled in their cups. Janelle braced a hand on the galley wall, and without thinking, reached for Sarah's elbow. The way people steady each other when they forget that help sometimes comes unasked. Amara capped her pen, rode the wobble easily, thought not unkindly. Turbulence is nothing compared to a room full of bad assumptions. When the air smoothed, Captain Barrett returned. "Apologies for the bump, folks. We're talking to air traffic about an earlier arrival. Headwinds have been kind." His voice, threaded through an instrument panel and 1,000 hours of decisions, sounded exactly like what it was, a person making a promise he could keep. Amara's phone vibrated with a different cadence. Jordan calling, not texting. She answered and kept her voice low. "Go." "We got the FO revision," Jordan said, breathless with the small victory that bureaucrats treat like feast days. They cut distress and misunderstanding. It now reads, "We apologize for discriminatory treatment experienced by Dr. Johnson. Heathrow and Border Force are conducting immediate review. Training enhanced. Outcomes public. Embassy wants to know if you'll acknowledge." "I'll acknowledge what they do, not what they draft," Amara said. If they make the training real and the outcomes public, they won't need my compliment." Jordan laughed because he knew her enough to know that was as close to joy as policy got. "Also," he said, "Stateside House Subcommittee on Civil Rights wants to invite you for testimony. They say you've captured the public's attention in a way that could move the needle." "I don't move needles," she said. "I measure them and then make other people explain why they didn't." "I'll translate that to Hill speak," he said. "Wheels down in 6. Give or take," she said and hung up. Dinner arrived. As if the body's needs could be scheduled between queries, Amara ate mechanically. Not because the food deserved indifference, but because feeding herself was a discipline she had learned the hard way. Never fight on an empty stomach. She thought briefly of the women who had taught her that. Her mother, who had fed before arguing. Her mentor, who had kept almonds in every bag. She added a bullet to the notebook. Care and fight are not opposites. The man in 1C finally found the courage to speak. "I said something stupid online," he blurted, face flushing. "About the lounge. My wife texted me. I deleted it," he swallowed. "I'm sorry." Amara looked at him a long moment. "Deleting is not the same as learning," she said. "But it's a start." He nodded, chastened, and turned his attention to the window, to the ocean, to his own reflection. The map on the overhead screen traced their arc toward the eastern seaboard. Notifications on phones across the cabin told their owners things they would pretend surprised them. Stocks wobbled. An airline posted a thread of contrition, whose third tweet included a picture of a diverse team smiling at a training. Someone leaked an internal memo in which the word optics appeared 6 times in 2 paragraphs. A civil rights organization posted a link to a guide titled, "Know Your Rights at Ports of Entry," and the traffic spike threatened to crash their site. The purser reappeared with a card the size of a postcard. On it, in simple print, a policy statement. Diplomatic and official passport processing, primary inspection procedures. At the top, the airline's logo. At the bottom, a QR code to the public manual. "We printed these in the galley," he said, almost shy. "It's not much, but it's a start. We'll keep a stack at the door, quietly." Amara took it, weighed the cardstock between her fingers. "Quietly is how things fail," she said. "Put it where people can see it. And put it in training, not just on paper." "Yes, ma'am," he said. And the ma'am was habit, but also respect. The descent announcement came with the tilt of light that made everyone look briefly cinematic. Phones clattered into pockets. Belts clicked. Out the window, the coastline assembled itself from haze. A gray ribbon, then a patchwork of winter fields. Then the glitter of the Potomac curving like a question toward a city that made a profession of them. Captain Barrett again, voice threaded with logistics. "Cabin crew, prepare for arrival. We'll be at the gate on time. For those of you continuing today, we wish you a smooth journey." He didn't say what everyone knew. For at least one passenger, the journey would continue at the gate. Touchdown was firm. The kind pilots prefer when the runway's wet with weather you can't see. Brakes throbbed underfoot. Reversers roared and then exhaled. The cabin applauded softly. Some for the landing, some for the day, some because hands needed to do something. As they taxied, Amara looked up and met Sarah's eyes. The attendant gave the tiniest nod, as if sending courage down a taut wire. The jet bridge aligned like an offered handshake. The door opened to a wall of faces and microphones bristling like a metallic meadow. Behind the press line, she could see 2 figures whose posture telegraphed authority. A State Department regional director she knew by sight, and next to him, a representative from the UK Foreign Office with the expression of a person deciding whether to kneel or to bow. Janelle stood frozen by the forward galley, the fight of a different morning written across her features. "We can hold the cabin," the purser murmured. "Let others deplane first if you'd prefer to avoid—" "I prefer order," Amara said. She unbuckled, stood, smoothed her scarf with a movement that looked like grace and felt like armor. "Families with small children first," she told the purser, loudly enough for row 3 to hear and for the microphones at the door to catch accidentally. "Then connections. Then we'll go row by row." The purser repeated the instruction on the PA. A collective sigh moved like a tide through the plane. People recognized fairness when it was pointed at them. Mothers lifted toddlers. A man in a suit exhaled relief. The teenager with the earbuds whispered, "She's running the gate," to his stream, which somewhere was now both admiring and instructional. When it was finally time, Amara stepped into the doorway. The representative from the Foreign Office began with, "Dr. Johnson, on behalf of Her Majesty's," and corrected himself mid-breath to, "His Majesty's government. We apologize for—" "You'll apologize in writing," she said, not unkindly, but with the efficiency of someone who understood the economy of contrition. "And you'll publish your training schedule. The rest you may say to the cameras." He blinked, nodded, a muscle in his jaw relaxed. He was grateful for instructions. The State Department director leaned in. "We've got you," he said under the hum of cameras. "I've got me," she said back, and then she stepped to the microphones, not to be consumed by them, but to speak through them. "Good afternoon," she began, and the room changed temperature. "What happened in London today is not new. It is not unique. It is not even sadly surprising. What is different is that you saw it. You recorded it, and because you did, institutions are going to do what they should have done without your cameras. Read their own policies, follow their own rules, and treat the people in front of them like the human beings their procedures claim to protect." She did not name names. She did not accuse individual staff. She did not recite her resume like a spell against indignity. She listed instead the outcomes that would have to happen for her to call any of this meaningful. Public metrics, external audits, training that included testimony instead of slogans, a card at every gate like the one the purser had printed, not in the galley but on the wall. "This is not about my passport," she said. "It is about whose belonging is assumed and whose belonging is questioned. Today mine was questioned. Tomorrow, it will be someone who does not have a camera or a government behind her. The policies we change today have to protect the person who isn't trending." Questions volleyed. She took 3. "Do you forgive Heathrow?" "Institutions don't need my forgiveness," she said. "They need to do their jobs." "Are you calling this racism?" "I am calling it what it is," she said, "and I am calling for what it requires. What do you want people watching to do?" "Read the policy," she said. "Ask for it. Keep your phones up. Keep your tempers down. And don't mistake a single apology for a systemic fix." She stepped back. The Foreign Office representative moved forward to say the words he had finally chosen. Better words than the draft. Still inadequate. And the State Department director did what directors do. He looked large next to a citizen to make the citizen bigger. Passengers streamed past, some with shy thank yous, some with the embarrassed half-smiles of people who had learned something against their will. The teenager with earbuds caught her eye, held up his phone like a salute, and she gave him a nod that landed in his chest like a medal. On the jet bridge, Janelle stood with her hands clasped, eyes bright. "I made the cards," she blurted when Amara passed. "We're putting them at the door." Not quietly. "Good," Amara said. "Now say it in the briefing every flight." "Yes," Janelle said. And this time the yes sounded like a beginning, not a surrender. In the terminal, beyond the metallic meadow, beyond the security cordons and the cool stare of institutions catching up to their own paperwork, Washington breathed its particular winter air, dry, ambitious. Amara felt the weight of the day settle across her shoulders like a cloak she had chosen, and would have to keep choosing. She lifted her bag, adjusted her scarf, and moved toward the next thing, which was not a fight but a meeting. And not a meeting but a map for people who would never know her name but would, if she did this right, feel the floor steadier under their feet the next time someone asked them to step into a glass pen and wait. The corridors of Capitol Hill carried a sound Amara had learned to read long before she was called to testify. The murmur of aides rehearsing questions, the shuffle of reporters staking territory, the clipped heels of staffers timing coffee runs to the minute. That morning the sound was thicker, charged with the weight of spectacle. There was not just a hearing scheduled. There was a hearing scheduled with a woman who had already become a symbol before she even sat down. Dr. Amara Johnson walked into the Rayburn building flanked not by bodyguards, but by paper, folders tucked under her arm, drafts of policy language, copies of Heathrow's official apology, her own notes scrawled in the margins like small landmines waiting for detonation. She wore the same discipline she had in London, a perfectly knotted scarf, a blazer sharp enough to remind people that she was both a scholar and a strategist, and shoes that clicked not with haste but with certainty. Outside the hearing room, cameras jostled, lenses extended like curious proboscises. A reporter shouted, "Dr. Johnson, do you plan to accuse Heathrow of racism?" Another yelled, "Is this just about one incident or do you see a systemic issue?" She gave them nothing but the steady look of someone who knew the difference between audience and participants. Silence was still her sharpest tool. The door to the chamber opened. Inside, rows of representatives shifted papers and adjusted microphones, each one balancing the theater of outrage with the mechanics of governance. The dais at the front gleamed under two bright lights. Placards bore names and states, like banners in a quiet war. Amara took her seat at the witness table. The placard before her read, "Dr. Amara L. Johnson, Special Envoy for Equity and International Policy." She noted, with private irony, that the title was both armor and target. Behind her, the gallery filled with journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens who had requested passes weeks ago when the incident first broke. Some wore t-shirts with Diplomat, while black printed in bold block letters. Others carried notebooks, pens poised like weapons. The chair banged the gavel. "The Committee on Civil Rights and International Affairs will come to order. Today we will examine the recent incident at London Heathrow Airport, involving a United States diplomat and allegations of discriminatory treatment. Dr. Johnson, thank you for appearing before us." Amara inclined her head. She had spoken before parliaments and panels, but this was different. This was home soil, and the ground had already been seeded with expectations. The first questions were perfunctory. "Can you recount in your own words what occurred on that day?" She did carefully, fact by fact, stripping the story of drama because she knew the drama had already been supplied by the internet. "I presented my diplomatic passport. It was questioned. I was asked to sit aside without cause. I declined. The incident was recorded. It circulated. The outcome is before you." Another representative leaned in. "Do you believe you were treated differently because of your race?" Amara held the silence long enough to make every person in the room shift. "I believe the legitimacy of my documents was questioned, not because of what they said, but because of who was holding them. That is the very definition of bias." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The chair rapped the gavel again. "Order." Questions sharpened. One congresswoman, a former prosecutor, asked, "What remedies would you suggest to prevent such incidents?" Amara slid one of her folders open. 3. First, mandatory visible policy cards at all ports of entry, clear, accessible, and enforced. Second, external audits of training, with metrics made public, not buried in internal memos. Third, a rapid escalation line for passengers whose rights are being violated, one that bypasses the institution currently committing the violation. She placed the folder flat on the table. "Anything less is cosmetic." Some representatives nodded vigorously, already seeing headlines they could quote in re-election campaigns. Others frowned, calculating the cost to airlines. The diplomatic strain with allies, the discomfort of confronting prejudice in systems designed to be neutral. Then came the hostile line of questioning. A congressman from a district more interested in airline profits than passenger dignity leaned forward. "Dr. Johnson, isn't it true that misunderstandings happen at airports every day? That staff are under pressure? Isn't it possible this was simply an overreaction on your part?" The room stilled. Amara felt the weight of every eye, every phone in the gallery streaming live. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice precise. "It is possible to misunderstand a boarding time. It is possible to misplace a bag. It is not possible to misunderstand the authority of a diplomatic passport. That document is recognized in every nation signatory to the Vienna Convention. To call its questioning a misunderstanding is to insult both the passport and the treaty it represents." The congressman shifted, unprepared for the depth of her response. His papers suddenly seemed insufficient armor. Another voice broke in, a younger representative who had built her career on civil rights litigation. "Dr. Johnson, would you agree that what happened to you is part of a pattern faced by travelers of color worldwide?" Amara did not hesitate. "Yes, And the difference between my case and thousands of others is not the severity of the injustice, but the presence of a camera and the backing of a government. Most people have neither. That is why policy matters. Applause erupted in the gallery before the gavel brought it back to silence. The hearing stretched for hours. Questions overlapped. Statements doubled as campaign ads, and Amara answered each with the same measured clarity. She did not allow herself the indulgence of anger, though she felt it simmering beneath her ribs. Instead, she gave them facts sharpened into tools, narratives polished into mirrors. By the time the chair adjourned, her voice had traveled beyond the chamber. Clips were already trending. "It is not possible to misunderstand a diplomatic passport," was on t-shirts before she left the building. Outside, the steps of Capitol Hill were a sea of microphones. The winter air cut sharp, but the crowd was hot with questions. "Do you think Heathrow should fire the staff involved? Are you calling for sanctions? Will you resign if this escalates into a diplomatic dispute?" Amara raised a hand and the noise softened, not out of deference but curiosity. "This is not about one staff member or one airport," she said. "It is about the systems that allow bias to masquerade as procedure. If Heathrow fires one person but keeps the same training, the same lack of accountability, then nothing changes. What we need is not scapegoats. What we need is structural reform." Her words echoed down the marble steps. Cameras flashed like lightning. For a moment, she felt the storm crest again, as it had in London. But this time, she stood not in an airport lounge, but at the center of her own capital, with the weight of a nation watching. That night, as she sat in her apartment with the city's lights stretching like arteries beyond her window, Amara finally allowed herself a breath. She opened her notebook, the same one she had written in on the plane, and added another line. "Symbols matter, but systems last." The work is systems. Her phone buzzed once more. Jordan again. "You did it," the message read. "They're already drafting bills." She closed the notebook, let the weight of the day settle, and whispered into the quiet, "One storm down. 1,000 more to go." And she knew as she turned off the light that her fight had only just begun.